How's it going? This is Hoiman, and today we're taking a look at the Totaku Mitsurugi figure. So taking a closer look at the character's face, I think overall they did an okay job at the face. It doesn't really look like Mitsurugi too much, but I think it's still quite enough to kind of tell who the character is. So the face sculpt overall is okay. And then you move on to the hair. It's quite nicely sculpted for the most part. So you have all the strands of the hair and how it all ties into a ponytail at the end. And the ponytail itself is nicely sculpted. You can still see all the hair textures in there. And then the fringe, you have the iconic spikes here. Looks quite nice for the most part. And they are quite a solid piece, so you have to be careful of them. And that's the same for the ponytail. I would have thought they would have went with a softer material, but it is actually quite delicate, so you have to be careful of that. And then the paintwork in the hair is pretty much just the matte black, so there's no level of shading or lighter tones to bring out the detail. But it still looks quite nice overall. But I will say there is a really noticeable seam line that runs from his neck and all the way around to the top of his head. So it is quite distracting. And for whatever reason, there is a bit of a paint scuff as well on his hair on this figure. Moving down to his body, the chest armor is nicely sculpted. You can see all the muscle definition in the sculpt, and it is painted in a nice metallic red. So it looks quite nice. But I will say the kind of buttons on the detailing and the gold stripes do kind of blend into the armor a bit. So it's a bit hard to kind of define those details, but they are actually present. That's the same case for the shoulder armor. Nicely sculpted with the use of metallic gold and red. Same for this armor as well. But of course you have the samurai armor as well. You can see all the different layers in the sculpt. Nice use of the gold as well. And then the sleeve on his armor. Nicely sculpted. You have the kanji there as well. Looks very nice and sharp. And then the gauntlet armor. Again, nicely detailed and sculpted. But again, you do have the seam line that kind of runs across the length of his arm. And it's much more noticeable on this arm as well. So it is a bit distracting. And then the skin itself has this really light wash over it to kind of bring out the detail a bit. So it kind of adds for a nice effect, but on a couple of figures I have seen that it's kind of all over the place. So the quality in the wash for the skin is a bit varying. Moving on to the sword, the handle itself doesn't really have any detail. And then the blade has a nice flame effect, and the flame itself is a nice translucent piece. So it looks very nice and effective. And then it runs all the way across the length of the blade. And then at the top you have the blade itself. Down to his legs. They're very baggy and nicely sculpted. You can still see the line definitions that run across them. But of course you have the folds as well. And then you have the nice tiger illustration here, which looks really nice and clean. It's painted on very well. And then the trousers themselves does have a darker and lighter tones to kind of bring out the folds a bit more. You have the ropes here, nicely sculpted. You can see all the texturing throughout it. But I will say it is quite a delicate piece, so you have to be careful of that. And then you have this side sachet. Looks really nice. It's actually kind of a glossy finish compared to the rest of the figure, so it does kind of stand out a bit. But the symbol is nicely painted on. And then down to the shoes themselves. Like the armor, it's painted in a nice metallic red and gold. And then the actual sandals are nicely sculpted with all the straps. And then the floor itself, I think the base is a bit bland. It's basically just a stone floor with a bit of pattern, but I don't feel that it really brings out the Soul Calibur world too much. So it would be nice if they chose a bit more of a iconic location. But as the base it is now, it's still nicely sculpted and detailed. And then the bottom, you have legal stuff. So overall, this is quite an okay looking Mitsurugi figure, and as of this video, it's pretty much the only Mitsurugi figure. So if you do plan on getting this character, this is pretty much your only option in terms of a figure. And for the most part, it is a nice looking figure. There's a lot of detail going on, nice use of paintwork. The metallic reds for the armor really stands out and has a nice effect. And then the fire sword itself has a really nice effect to it as well. And overall the sculpt is very nice. But with my main gripes about the face not quite capturing the lightness of the character, the noticeable seam lines that run across his head and as well as his arms, and then the really delicate parts such as his hair, his scabbard, his rope, and then the sword itself does make this figure very fragile. But I think my main gripe with this figure is the sword itself. So if you look closely, the flame is supposed to wrap around the blade, but if you look closely inside, there's actually no blade inside. It's literally just the flame itself, and then the tip is the only blade that's sculpted. So it would be nice if the blade actually ran through the entire length of the flames, because then it kind of captures what the effect is going for. But it is a very minor detail, and it's just something that once you see it, you can't really unsee it. But it's not too much of a problem, but it's just something I thought I'd point out. But despite those gripes, like I said, this is pretty much the only Mitsurugi figure out there, so if you're a fan of this character or the games, then I can still recommend this figure. But that's my review, thank you for watching and enjoy some pictures.